I'm Heather Koldewey and I'm a marine conservationist with the Zoological Society of London. For much of my career, I've been working on seahorse conservation, these incredible charismatic fishes that are also so incredibly threatened. So imagine how I felt when just about 3 years ago I saw this remarkable image of a beautiful, delicate seahorse drifting through the ocean, holding on to a cotton bud, a piece of plastic pollution that should never have been in the ocean. This really summarised for me the challenges the ocean is facing and also solutions in ways that we can address it. So my work with seahorse conservation has taken me to work in the Philippines for over 20 years, working with an incredible team of local biologists and community organisers. We're working with communities who live right on the coast on small islands and are completely dependent on the ocean for their livelihoods. They need to go out each day to catch fish in order to sell or eat just to survive. Unfortunately, as time has gone on, we've seen changes to the ocean and not in a good way. As pressure on resources increase, the number of fish have decreased. And this means that the amount of fishing effort has gone up. So more people out fishing for longer and with more nets. But maybe one part of that familiar story that we don't think about is what those nets are made of and the materials. And those nets are really made from plastic. Means at the end of life, as those nets are broken by being caught up on crabs or on the bottom, they become waste material that serves no purpose. And on islands and villages where there's no waste management system at all, meaning that they're discarded onto the beaches or into the ocean. Now at this point, those nets are ghost fishing, catching fish that nobody benefits from and incredibly damaging for the environment. And these plastic nets last for hundreds of years. So what to do about it? Well, working with a really innovative and collaborative team of business and biologists and local communities, we've been able to set up a supply chain, an international supply chain to connect those fishing communities which have those waste nets through to an international business that can actually deal with those nets and recycle those nets into something valuable. To do that, we had to try and make that whole system work. So firstly, developing a system to collect those nets out of the ocean, off the beaches and clean them and get them ready to move. We then had to work out how to manoeuvre those nets. They're very light and puffy on their own. So we developed a baling system to compress and compact those nets into bales that were more efficient for transport. Using trucks that were bringing bamboo and other building materials into communities, we were able to arrange for those same trucks to take the bales of nets out of those communities, having aggregated them together from different islands. At this point, those nets are ready for export, and those bales were designed to slot neatly into a container before being exported to Europe. Once they get to Europe, they go to a bespoke factory where they're made into econyl yarn. This yarn has the same performance qualities as yarn that comes from fossil fuels. So we're seeing a very high value, high grade material entering a supply chain, being made into this nylon yarn, where it then is a material called econyl that goes on to make carpets or fashion materials, and we're increasingly seeing this used. What's exciting at that point is that material is then entering a circular economy. So those carpets designed by Interface at the end of life are then in a circular economy by being recycled themselves. So we're taking them out of the environment and into a reuse and recycling system. We also anchored this model on two important things for communities. One was to help them with their livelihoods. We used a very successful model from the development sector known as village savings and loan associations. And what's exciting in conservation is working across sectors and looking to other locations of where people have developed solutions that we can use and apply and adapt. So these are self-help savings groups that address the need for remote communities and isolated communities with limited income to have access to financial services, whether that's access to loans to set up a new business or deal with immediate needs, or insurance in times of need. So these have worked incredibly well, and our innovation around these was to add an environment fund, a way of community saving so they can make their own decisions and actions around how to save their environment locally. And we've seen this being a huge and empowering way forward for those communities. It's not just about the communities, it's also about the environment. And we are actually seeing through the research that we've done that those beaches are cleaner. We don't see the nets discarded anymore. They now go straight into that supply chain rather than being thrown away. We've also developed and diversified this scheme to other products. We're using the same principles. We've gone to one of the other major livelihoods in these fishing communities, and that is seaweed farming. The seaweed is used to produce carrageening, which is a stabilising agent and used in a variety of products, from food items through to toothpaste and even fire retardants. And at this point, this project run by ZSL has gone on a new journey, a new stage and a new adventure. And that's spinning it out as its own entity, its own organisation called Coast 4C. The social enterprise is just starting up, looking forward to building its capacity and investment to be able to deliver the full potential around benefiting communities and the environment. And importantly, these supply chains, this business model approach is connected to the environment and marine protection. And through this, we've been able to replicate and expand bigger and better marine protected areas. Because it's not just about reducing damage to the ocean and reducing plastic in the ocean, it's also about the recovery of fish populations and marine biodiversity in general. So it's not about having the situation we could be looking at of having more plastic and fish, but actually focusing on having a lot more fish as well as having a lot less plastic. One of the challenges we face in conservation is also, how do you take projects to scale? How replicable are they? How can you take something that you have happening in one community or one country to another location? Now, I was really fortunate in 2019 to be the science co-lead of a National Geographic expedition up the Ganges River from sea to source. Our goal was to really understand how much plastic pollution is coming from rivers into the ocean, to measure that empirically, but to look at the source of the plastic, the types of the plastic, the load and the flow through the system. We were an international team working with local partners from Bangladesh and India. It was a truly interdisciplinary team, working with social scientists, anthropologists, biologists, environmental engineers, technology experts, plastics experts, and so on. And we really focused in building our team of early career scientists who were really also giving opportunities for women in science, technology, engineering and maths. Now, this incredible team travelled the whole length of the river system twice, before and after the monsoon. And one of the things that we focused on was looking at the discarded fishing nets, looking at this from one of the first times to look at it from the perspective of freshwater fisheries rather than marine fisheries, and thinking about this in terms of how much plastic input was going into the river system and how much of that may end up contributing to fishing nets in the ocean. Now, what we found was, once again, that most of these nets were made of plastic, and most of that was made of nylon 6. So here again we had this high value material that can feed into supply chains and be recycled and re-engineered into products that can go on and be recycled themselves. So a really exciting opportunity. And what's particularly exciting from my perspective is that we're now entering the stage of having done that science and done that research, of being able to pilot and take forward the full feasibility studies in both Bangladesh and India to see if we can replicate the model that we developed in the Philippines. So watch this space for that. We didn't just look at discarded fishing gear and fishing nets, but a whole suite of plastic pollution, from looking on land to looking in the water at microplastics, and also looking at how macroplastics, floating plastic items, might move through the river system and out into the ocean. One of the really new developments and new technologies that we developed during that time was a new technology, working with a conservation technologist, to develop a satellite and cell phone bottle tag, taking that tagging technology from wildlife, but basically packaging it up inside a 500 millilitre plastic bottle. These were deployed in the river. When in cell phone signal, they were able to communicate with the cell phone and send messages of their location. And as they moved out into the ocean and out of contact, then they switched over to satellite technology and satellite messaging. One of the bottles moved out of the river into the Bay of Bengal, travelling almost 3,000 kilometres in just 3-month period. Now, the batteries on these bottles last for up to 2 years. So again, we look forward to following this journey. Now we've really progressed and piloted this technology. Out of the expedition, we developed a toolkit of our methodologies to make the information open access as much as possible. And that included the full plans and ways of building your own bottle tag, should you want to. So it's entirely open source technology. Closer to home, I wanted to zoom in on the United Kingdom, which is where I'm from. We actually generate far more plastic waste than all of the countries that I've been talking about per person. One of the craziest items, going back to those plastic bottles, is thinking about the amount that we generate as waste. So here we are in a country where we have perfectly healthy drinking water coming out of our taps. We're an island nation, we're an ocean nation, and yet we don't think about what happens to that plastic waste. On average, every adult in the UK uses 175 single-use plastic water bottles every year, and many of those end up littering our environment. In London alone, the home of the Zoological Society of London, we're producing and using 1.2 billion single-use plastic water bottles every year. Our idea was to run an experiment called OneLess. Could we change that system? Could we move from a system where we've become very quickly, just over a few decades, dependent on single-use plastic, to a refill system, a more sustainable and long-lasting system? As a collaborative team, we looked to unpack that system, to really understand it, to look at where the barriers to change were. Why can't we do that? And then to systematically go about trying to overcome those barriers. This ranged from understanding the economic models and economic arguments and looking for alternatives. Behavioural barriers. Don't like the taste of tap water. It's too warm. How do you overcome those? And of course, looking at infrastructure. We have a really simple solution. Just using a refill bottle is a simple way of moving away from single-use plastic. But you have to be able to refill on the go, and that was one of the barriers that we found. So working with the Mayor of London's office, we've been fortunate to do a pilot programme where we installed 29 drinking fountains across London in free open access spaces, so people can refill when they're out and about and have access to healthy drinking water on the go. The next stage of this programme was a really positive expansion and extrapolation of this initiative, with the Mayor of London's office continuing to work with Thames Water and expand this network of fountains, which is a project that's underway right now. So soon it will become much more easy in much more places to be able to access healthy drinking water in London. This means that we can reduce our plastic footprint. We have data to show that these fountains are removing the need for a number of plastic water bottles. And we hope that London will continue this great trajectory of its being one of the first places in the world where we really see the elimination of unnecessary single-use plastic. But I'm here by the sea because actually I'm very fortunate to live in Cornwall, right by the sea. It's on my doorstep. It seems right as a marine biologist. I grew up coming to Cornwall on holiday playing on the beach with my family, and my children have grown up here. But the difference for them is every time we go to the beach, we do a beach clean, we pick up plastic waste. I never saw that as a child. It's been a really dramatic change over time and not for the better. But what's positive is seeing changes in my community. I'm really proud to work with Surfers Against Sewage in their Plastic Free Communities initiative. The very first town in the country to be awarded that status was neighbouring Penzance, just right next to where I live. And what does that actually mean? Well, it means businesses have come together and working to reduce their single-use plastic footprint. It means community groups, it means schools, it means colleges, and it means the councils and the mayors and the governing bodies are getting involved to reduce single-use plastic. We're seeing incredible innovations and ideas and new ways of doing things from the wonderful independent businesses here. And we're seeing that driving change for some of the national businesses and huge efforts that are actually happening. So here we have a grassroots initiative that started in the communities where I live in Cornwall, but has now expanded nationally and out away from the coast. So we now see hundreds of communities, inland, urban, rural and coastal, that are participating to reduce their plastic footprint, to clean up the environment and to make a better place, a better future for our children and their children. That's why I'm optimistic. That's why I'm an ocean optimist and an earth optimist, is that everywhere I go in the world, I see incredible people doing remarkable things for the environment and making change. So whatever sector people are in, increasingly hoping and seeing people identify as conservationists to see that they can make a difference, even if it's as simple as just not using a single-use plastic water bottle anymore and refilling. I'm an optimist, and I hope you are too. Thank you.